Before we get into the episode, the program, we got to use the fair use. What's good? Your boy Nova Real for the Nova Real Show, and this is Jeffrey Dahmer explaining why he did what he did.
No one had a clue as to what was happening for over a decade.
During that time, Jeffrey Dahmer joined the army and was sent to Germany. He was eventually discharged for a drinking problem and returned to Ohio. 9 years after Stephen Hicks' murder,
Fair use
began again. What happened to you in the 9 years in between that you were able to stop, that you were able to control yourself?
It just wasn't an opportunity to fully express what I wanted to do. There was just not the physical opportunity to do it then. And I started, when I moved to Milwaukee in 81, I started reading pornography, going to the bookstores. Eventually that led to frequenting the gay bars. And then one time I brought this young man back to the hotel room, the Ambassador Hotel. Was just planning on drugging him and spending the night with him.
This is his second victim that he's talking about.
When I woke up in the morning, he had a broken rib here. I was heavily bruised. Apparently I had beaten him to death with my fists.
And you have no memory?
I have no memory of it. But that's what started the whole spree all over again.
Dahmer says he snuck the corpse of his victim, Stephen Toomey, out of his hotel room in a suitcase. Then he took it to his grandmother's house, where he cut up the body and put it in plastic garbage bags. When you killed these men, afterwards, were you repulsed? Were you upset?
No, at the time, it was almost addictive. It was almost a surge of energy. I wouldn't have to worry about any of their needs or anything. I just had complete control of the situation.
But Jeffrey Dahmer was out of control. The urge to kill had overpowered him. As police later learned, he wasn't satisfied with his victim's death. He wanted more. Why did you photograph them?
It was my way of remembering their appearance, their physical beauty. I also wanted to keep something. If I couldn't keep them there with me whole, at least I felt that I could keep their skeletons. And I even went so far as planning on setting up an altar with the 10 different skulls and skeletons.
And what was the purpose of the altar going to be?
As a sort of memorial. A point where I could, I don't know, it's so bizarre and strange, it's hard to describe. A place where I could collect my thoughts and feed my obsession.
When the bodies were still in your apartment, there was no time when you would see them and say, this is grotesque, what have I done?
There were times, but the compulsive obsession with doing what I was doing overpowered any feelings of revulsion.
This man with a quiet, almost shy demeanor became a master manipulator who was able to lure strangers he met at gay bars to his apartment. He was even able to con the police into returning a 14-year-old boy to him after neighbors called 911 upset that the child was in the street naked and bleeding. Dahmer convinced the police that he and the boy were simply having a lover's quarrel.
It's a intoxicated boyfriend of another boyfriend.
How old was this child?
It wasn't a child, it was an adult.
After the police left, Jeffrey Dahmer murdered that boy, Conorak Synthesymphone. This man says he had a near-fatal encounter with Jeffrey Dahmer.
He wanted to take some picture of my back. He hit me with a rubber hammer on my neck.
He was lucky to escape because by then the killing had become almost routine. Before you went out to pick up a man, was there any kind of ritual you went through?
Prayers goes out to the victims' families and the victims.
Watch the striptease shows. And if I didn't meet anyone at the bars, I'd go to the bath clubs and meet someone there, offer them money, and we'd go back to the apartment, have a few drinks. I'd have the sleeping pill mixture already prepared. Person would drink it, fall asleep, and that's when they would be strangled.
Watching the movie Exorcist 3 was also part of his ritual. It put him in the mood for murder.
I felt so hopelessly evil and perverted that I actually derived a sort of...
He used to wear yellow contacts, like the character from Star Wars
No.
and The Exorcist.
No, I didn't. But I tried to overcome the thoughts, and it worked for a while, but eventually I gave in.
While Jeffrey Dahmer may say things today that make it seem like he understands what went on in his mind, he does not. All he can do is tell you what happened, but he cannot stop whatever it is that drove him to kill in the first place. Do you still feel those same urges? Do you still feel that compulsion, that obsession?
I wish I could say that it just left completely, but no, there are times when I still do have the old compulsions.
And coming next, as we continue, Dahmer talks about how his obsessions became more and more out of control.
I was dead set on going with this compulsion. It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
To protect ourselves against monsters like
Fair use.
Dahmer, it is important to know how they think, how they operate. Dahmer is an intelligent man, someone who could live just about anywhere. Nancy now continues her interview.
Bill, Jeffrey Dahmer says as time went on, his mind became more and more warped, and yet he was clever enough to continue to elude police and lure young men to his apartment. We should warn you, the details are very graphic.
I started having these obsessive thoughts when I was about 15 and 16, and they got worse and worse.
What were your fantasies about?
They were sexual fantasies of control, power, complete dominance. They became reality.
Was there pleasure in that fantasy?
There was excitement, fear, pleasure, all mixed together.
Jeffrey Dahmer fulfilled his fantasies by murdering and dismembering 17 young men.
17 victims.
His desires became more extreme, his deeds more grotesque. Listen to him talk about the most unnatural things in the most matter-of-fact of ways. That's when you realize that none of it has touched him.
I was branching out. That's when the cannibalism started, eating of the heart and the arm muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me. At first it was just curiosity, and then it became compulsive. Then I tried to keep the person alive by inducing a zombie-like state. By injecting first dilute acid solution into their brain, or
He actually was drilling holes through their head, through the skull, to the brain while they was alive.
Could someone like
Putting
you be
acid in it.
stopped? Could you be helped?
no, I was dead set on going with this compulsion. It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
He became so warped by his evil impulses that he even took a victim's head with him to work at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory.
Crazy.
I kept the mummified head and skull of one of the victims in a carrying case in my locker at work.
Were you almost flaunting it?
Yes, but that's how strong the compulsion was. That's how bizarre the desire was. I wanted to keep something of the person with me.
Jeffrey Dahmer exhibited some disturbing behavior early on. He began drinking heavily as a teenager, dropped out of college, was arrested for indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, and fondling a 13-year-old boy. Tragically, one of his murder victims would be that boy's brother.
Do you know what started it? Was there any kind of incident that you can remember?
To this day, I don't know what started it. And the person to blame is sitting right across from you. That's the only person. Not parents, not society, not pornography. I mean, those are just excuses.
His macabre 13-year crime spree finally ended when this man, Tracy Edwards, brought the police to the infamous apartment. Like the others, he had gone there with the promise of money.
He was listening to my heart because at a point he told me he was going to eat my heart at that point. I hit him and I ran.
That's the guy that got away.
For you that made you
He got away, and the police came to the apartment, and they found out what Jeffrey Dahmer was doing.
It was the night of the arrest. I have no memory of what happened during the 6 hours before the last victim ran out of the apartment. I heard a knock on the door, and the police were there with the last victim. They asked me where the key was to the handcuffs. My mind was in a haze. I sort of pointed to the bedroom, and that's where they found the pictures. And they yelled, "Cuff him." And I was handcuffed. And it was just the realization that there was no point in trying to hide my actions anymore. The best route was to help the police identify all the victims and just make a complete confession.
When it was revealed that most of the victims were black or homosexual, people in Milwaukee were incensed. Many felt that was why he went after them and why the police didn't seem to care when their families reported them missing.
10 of your 17 victims were black. Were they racially motivated?
It was not racially motivated. It was not sexual preference. It was just to find an obsession with the best-looking young man I could find.
I think it was.
Say that his sexual preference had nothing to do with the
I think he went after poor people because he knew that the police wouldn't care. That's what I
There was no
believe.
use trying to fight it because I couldn't rid myself of it. It was too powerful and persistent.
Do you dislike it?
Yes, it's caused a lot of problems for me. A lot of conflicts and unanswered questions.
The conflicts remain with him, and so do his compulsions. But in prison, he finally cannot act on his savage desires.
If you were out on the street now, would you still be committing the crimes?
Probably. If this hadn't happened, there's no doubt I probably would be. I can't think of anything that would have stopped me.
Boy, does he come across as cold-blooded. Did you see any remorse?
Well, he says he's sorry, Bill, but I'm not sure he knows what that means. Tomorrow he talks about how he disassociated himself from his crimes and what lengths he went to hide them.
We will see you tomorrow, Nancy. Thank you. And inside today, Jeffrey Dahmer spoke for the first time about
This is
his
part two.
passion for killing.
This
Today,
is part two.
Inside Edition continues the exclusive interview with Dahmer, and what he says will shock you.
Fair use, fair use.
It's the interview the nation is talking about. Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer speaking for the first time.
Why was it so easy, Bill, for you to hide it all?
I bought security systems, installed them myself in the apartment. I had a video camera in the corner of the room.
Today, Nancy Glass continues her remarkable interview with serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer.
She was home alone when an intruder turned her evening into a night of terror.
What would you do if a thug broke into your house? Could you handle yourself? Coming up, a harrowing story about a woman saved by 911. But first, reaction to the words of Jeffrey Dahmer is worldwide. It is one thing to read about his crimes, quite another to hear how dispassionately this killer talks about his grisly deeds. Nancy Glass joins us now to continue her exclusive interview with Dahmer. Nancy.
Bill, Jeffrey Dahmer is now in jail serving 15 consecutive life terms for his terrible crimes. Wisconsin does not have the death penalty. In prison, he is getting therapy, but he says it hasn't helped him. He spends his time reading the Bible and volumes of mail. I asked him if he was afraid of what might happen in prison, and he said, no. What difference does it make if someone comes after him, because he doesn't care if he lives or dies.
Is that universal law? Because in prison, a man beat him with a weight to death. And what a coincidence, his first victim, he beat him with a weight.
Drove him to inhuman acts on the living and the dead. He was a killing machine out of control.
How should you be punished?
Well, there's no question that I deserve the death penalty. I've wondered myself why I don't have the death penalty. That's what I deserve. I deserve death.
What do you think happens after you die?
Right. That's the big unknown. I've had thoughts of suicide, but I just haven't been able to carry them through. So I don't know what the future will hold.
In the past, Jeffrey Dahmer was very sure of what he wanted and how to get it. 17 young men would die at his hands. Later, when he made this confession to the police, he included crimes too grotesque to repeat on television, too gruesome to be believed. Dismemberment, cannibalism, and worse. And he was cunning enough to get away with it for 13 years.
Why was it so easy, though, for you to hide it all?
I desensitized myself to it. I don't know, I went to great lengths. I bought security systems, installed them myself.
If you notice, every time you see him, in every picture, he looks different. Let me know in the comments if y'all feel the same.
Locks on the doors, sirens and stuff in case anyone broke into the apartment.
And although his victims' body parts were in the apartment, when his father and stepmother came to visit, they detected nothing.
They said it was absolutely clean, perfect.
Right.
How'd you hide from them?
Everything was locked up, either in the freezer or in the...
Here's another key fact, too. In the trial, he rarely put on his glasses because he didn't want to look at the victim's family.
There was nothing...
And he needed his glasses to see.
And he almost got caught after a 14-year-old victim escaped into the street, naked and bleeding. When neighbors called 911, Dahmer managed to talk his way out of trouble.
During the incident where the police were called,
Mm-hmm.
and the young boy was returned to you, that didn't wake you up at all? The police on your doorstep?
They were in the apartment. They were actually in the apartment, and there was a dead young man in the bedroom on the floor. I couldn't believe it when it turned out that they didn't see anything. I couldn't believe it. And yes, it did shock me, but not enough to quit. That's how strong the compulsion was.
Jeffrey Dahmer describes the unspeakable with no emotion. It is as if he sees his victims as objects, not people. In fact, when he confessed, he remembered every horrific detail of what he did to them, but he couldn't remember their names.
Do you ever think about your victims?
I've often wondered why I haven't had more dreams or nightmares about what I've done. For some reason, it's like it's blocked off.
Fair use. This is Dahmer's in his own words.
All the time, I wouldn't be able to function.
Jeffrey Dahmer prefers to hide from the difficult truth about himself. That has always been his pattern. Even during his trial, he found a way to tune out.
You're wearing glasses now.
Right.
You didn't during the trial. Why not?
I didn't want to I felt uncomfortable looking anyone in the face. I didn't want to.
See, I told
see
y'all,
anyone's face clearly.
this is why he didn't wear glasses in the trial.
From what was happening.
One woman in particular really got angry. What did you think when she was doing that?
I couldn't blame her a bit. I'm surprised there wasn't more of that.
What do you want to say to the families of the victims?
I had no intention of hurting them. I was extremely selfish. I was only thinking of myself, my own pleasure, my own perverted desires.
You know the families of the victims don't believe in your conversion or your sorrow.
Oh, right. And if I was on their
He became a Christian in prison
I wouldn't either.
and got baptized.
I'm accountable.
He got
to the Lord
baptized
Jesus Christ. He healed
on
me
the
of my
eclipse
bondage.
the same day
The Lord Jesus Christ
that Gacy died.
is powerful enough to
Crazy, right?
wipe out even my sins.
When he had to deal with some of the terrible realities of his life, Jeffrey Dahmer's conversation would veer off into scripture. Like many other criminals, he claims he has found God in prison, and his daily routine reflects his need to shut out the world.
I usually wake up at 6:30 in the morning, go eat breakfast, and then sleep until noon, wake up for lunch, and sleep until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, eat dinner, and then spend the greater portion of the night watching TV.
He is up all night because he cannot face the daylight and the monstrous crimes that put him behind bars.
I try not to think too deeply about anything, because then I get depressed. I try to figure out why this happened, what started these thoughts in my head at such a young age, whether this has any meaning to it, or whether this is all just a horrible coincidence, all the events in my life. I feel that I'm better off here than I was on the outside doing.
You're damn right you was better off in jail.
I think it's best for everyone, right?
And you heard Jeffrey Dahmer say he wants to be punished. The victims' families agree. They voice their opinions tomorrow. And Jeffrey Dahmer talks about his early years and his family life. Why did this happen?
I had normal friendships in high school, but after that, I started in with the alcohol, drinking, a lot of solitary drinking, and really never had any close friendships after that, after high school. Just sort of lived in my own thought life, fantasy world.
What created those twisted fantasies is a question many are asking. According to some experts, Jeffrey Dahmer does not fit the profile of a ritual murderer.
The typical serial killer kills for the thrill, for the excitement. He wants to hear the victim scream and shout and try to get away.
Northeastern University professor Jack Levin is a sociologist and criminologist who has studied hundreds of serial killers.
Well, this just go on in the study about serial killers, but that was Jeffrey Dahmer's, in his own words, explaining why he did what he did. It's Nova Road for the Nova Road Show. Leave some in the comments. Let me know how you feel about this. Subscribe, like, share.
That he may actually have felt guilty.